All right, today's book, The Fall of Paris, The Siege in the Commune, 1870 to 71, by Alistair Horn. Odd coincidence, the next book that I'm going to read is also by Alistair Horn. But I first became familiar with this back when I was like 25 years old. I had fallen in with a group of communists, and I actually passed out at work. I passed out like a communist newsletter thing. It was called the Red Lantern. When my dad found out that I was doing that, he said, when I was a kid, I was a communist too, so I guess it runs in the family. Basically, there was the Franco-Prussian War. The French kind of brought it on themselves, and they conducted the war rather poorly. The French soldiers were not even given maps of France. They were just given maps of Germany. And they didn't spend very much time in Germany. The entire war was fought on French soil, and they did rather poorly. Not very far into the war, Napoleon III, was taken captive, along with about 200,000 French soldiers at Sedan, and Paris was surrounded. And the Parisians, they had their own little election, and they, elected a new government, and then they did it again. One thing you have to remember about the people of Paris is they felt like they were France, and everybody else in the countryside was just kind of like their helpers. It didn't go well for Paris. They ended up signing an armistice, and then that's when the Commune kind of comes around, because they're pissed off that there was an armistice signed. There's like 400,000 French soldiers inside Paris. They try making 3 sorties, and they all fail miserably. So after the Commune comes around, some of the guys, they can see the writing on the wall. They don't agree with the Commune. They move their version of the government to Versailles, and it kind of goes from there. The people in the Commune maybe have a little chance to attack Versailles in the beginning, but they even try to do that, and it goes poorly. It was a wonderful book, 433 pages. I got some stuff marked. There was several Civil War generals from the United States that went, and primarily they went and hung out with the Prussians, and they watched battles, and I just thought this was cool because U.S. General Burnside's famous remark after visiting Paris under truce in October, he said, "It's a madhouse inhabited by monkeys." Things were crazy in Paris. The war's not even over, and there's a guy named Truchot that's trying to take care of Paris, and they almost take over. They haven't even signed the frickin' armistice yet or nothing. They're trying to boot out Truchot and get another government going. The war is still going on. I just marked this down because one of the Prussian generals that was prosecuting the war in the south of France, the people in Paris had no idea what was going on. His name was von der Tann, and if anybody is familiar with the Battle of Jutland, one of the German battle cruisers was named von der Tann. I never knew where that name come from. Now I do. Not only was Victor Hugo in Paris, and he wrote all kinds of silly-ass shit, but Gustave Doré was in Paris too, along with a lot of painters and all kinds of people that you would expect, from that kind of a city. Here we are, we're into the siege where the people of Paris are kind of running out of food. they actually go to the Paris Zoo, and they kill, all the animals and eat them, even the elephants. They decide not to kill the lions and the tigers because they thought it would be too dangerous. But they're also eating rats, cats, and dogs. And this is so funny. I've read several books about the Paris Commune, and I remember this quote from another book, and I was hoping it would be in here, and here it is. Soon the animals observed that man was regarding them in a strange manner, and that, under the pretext of caressing them, his hand was feeling them like the fingers of a butcher to ascertain the state of their embonpoint. This book has a lot of French words that it doesn't bother to tell you what they mean. More intellectual and more suspicious than dogs, the cats were the first to understand and adopted the greatest prudence in their relations. The cats ran away. At one point, they decided to all sit around and pray because it had came to the anniversary of Saint Genevieve that apparently scared away the Huns from Paris. Not too long into the commune, the French are shooting each other. It doesn't take long. They start shooting at each other. Okay, there's an armistice. The Germans only allow the French to have so many troops as one of the conditions of the armistice. But soon after, Thiers is the guy's name. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Begs Bismarck to allow them more troops. Bismarck knows what's going on, and he does. They're only allowed like 40,000, and Bismarck goes all the way up to 170,000. Just some more stuff about Thiers. I think Thiers, to me, is the real hero of this book. Part of the armistice agreement is that the Germans are allowed to have a parade in Paris. Everybody threatens, we're gonna, this is gonna happen, that's gonna happen, there's gonna be shooting, but there isn't any. I just thought this was funny. If you know anything about Bismarck, I've got a couple of biographies of Bismarck, and he was kind of a crazy guy. There was an ugly moment when Bismarck found himself surrounded by a glaring crowd on the Place de la Concorde. But with superb aplomb, he took out a cigar and asked the most hostile-looking spectator for a light. I know the last part of this book I didn't mark much at all because when it gets into the French nationals fighting the communards, the book moves really fast. This is just a marker of, one of these times when the commune people, they have elections, they have announcements. It only lasted for 2 months. They did like 395 announcements, and they just can never understand. They can't decide on anything. They can't decide on anything but let's have more meetings. Bismarck, when he sees what's going on, he literally speeds up the return of prisoners of war. They had just probably 400,000 French prisoners of war. This is a guy named Roussel. The leadership of the commune came and went. People came out of favor. They got thrown in jail. This is what Roussel writes. Citizen members of the commune, I feel myself incapable of continuing to bear the responsibility of a command which everyone discusses and no one obeys. The Commune discusses and has resolved nothing. The Committee Central discusses and has not yet been able to act. During this delay, the enemy was surrounding Fort Issy, and when he says the enemy, that's the French nationals, by adventurous and impudent attacks for which I should punish him had I the least military force at my disposal. The nullity of the Artillery Committee prevented the organization of the artillery. The hesitations of the Central Committee hindered the administration. The petty preoccupations of the battalion commanders paralyzed the mobilization of troops.
Bourgeois.
You ever have one of those words that you can't pronounce?
Bourgeois.
Bourgeois. I don't know why that's playing over and over. Paralyzed the mobilization of the troops. My predecessor made the mistake of striving against this absurd situation. I am withdrawing, and I have the honor to request from you a cell in the Mazas. The Mazas was a prison that they used. The Commune was crazy. They were a little bit less violent than the French nationals retaking the place, but given time, they would have been just as violent. They tried to burn Paris down. It was a crazy time, and it wasn't the only time that it happened. The French gave over Paris in the Second World War so efficiently to the Germans because they didn't want this to happen again. Anyways, wonderful book, and that's about it.